Hi, this is Natu, a guy who's way too old and way too long involved in this game, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
The final of IEM Katowice, the 14th CSGO major, is upon us. Two teams remaining. Astralis, reigning major champions, perhaps the greatest team to ever play Counter-Strike, world number ones for seemingly forever now, won the majority of the events last year and obviously the last major. Yes, we expected they'd probably be here. Some people thought maybe MIBR could upset them. Some people thought maybe they'd be playing Team Liquid in the final, Na'Vi in the final, maybe an outside chance of someone like FaZe in the final. But actually, they are playing the most unlikely of opponents. They are playing the very same ENCE, who only just qualified for their first major, who had to sneak through each of the phases, yes, at times showing us quality, showing they were a real team, showing that they had a plucky quality to them, that they could overcome odds through to playing fundamentals, having a good map pool, having certain performances from players who you don't expect to go big, having big games in their first ever playoff. But what a David and Goliath story we have. Every single narrative, every intangible says Astralis wins. Astralis get their third major. They go back to back. This cements this era as truly the greatest ever witnessed. Every analytical aspect says it goes to Astralis. They probably win all the maps. They have the better fragging aspect. They have the more experienced players. But can you count ENCE out? They've been counted out throughout the tournament. By the way, justifiably. They've a team that you look at. They're not supposed to win these best of threes against these top-level teams. They don't have the experience doing it. Yes, they've got the solid fundamentals, but usually that doesn't help as much in playoffs. Because when you get to the major playoffs, so much pressure on you. That's when the stars come out and shine. There's a reason why a lot of the teams in the finals of majors are the greatest teams to ever play the game, win or lose. So incredible accomplishment already by ENCE. Far beyond what anyone could have expected, could have hoped for. But do they have a chance to beat Astralis? I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I don't give you fake hype. I don't build up narratives just because they seem sexy. The answer is no. The spoiler is no, but we're going to get into why. So first of all, let's talk about how these teams got here. So ENCE have been on a fucking legendary run because they've already beaten the number 2 team in the world when they were in the quarterfinals. That was the Team Liquid squad, who a lot of people had winning the major. Then in the semi-finals, they just beat Na'Vi, who's the number 3 team in the world, one of the other top teams throughout most of last year. They were able to get to the final. Admittedly, the win over Team Liquid was a fairly convincing. That was really well done. They 2-0'd it. They outplayed them in the veto in terms of Team Liquid got what they wanted, but didn't matter. The ENCE guys were able to win both the maps. This semi-final was a very different story though. On the one hand, I will say, if Simple had played even 3% less well, this could actually have been a much more convincing win for ENCE. They did look like, as a team, they outplayed Na'Vi. The thing is, Simple had one of the best playoff series you will ever witness in a major. And he almost even won the whole fucking series for Na'Vi, even though Na'Vi, quite frankly, had no real business winning that series. I know on paper they did. For example, the 2 maps they lost were 14-16. They were maps, obviously, that they're very, very good on. Train and Mirage. They won their own map, which isn't even that strong a map for them, Dust 2, which is a weird punish pick. They stomped it completely. But even so, ENCE did everything you could have expected and more. They had overperformed some certain players. On the Na'Vi side of things, Electronic wasn't good enough. Flamey cooled right off. Zeus actually was doing half decently, and then it was mostly just on Simple's shoulders. And by God, he almost did it in that third map. That was some incredible Counter-Strike. What a memorable third map. But it was not to be. He did not go to the final. ENCE made it through. So let's talk a little bit now about the Astralis side of the equation. Because they had an opponent in MIBR that knows them very well. The cores of these two teams that have played in the past. And yeah, you know what? Astralis used to be the spoiler for MIBR. So people thought MIBR could be the spoiler for Astralis. Not that ridiculous a premise, by the way. I told you they had a chance in that series. I even said this was the team I wanted to get back together so they would have a crack at going against Astralis. Being as the teams I want to be able to go against them are variants of the successful SK/Luminosity or Virtus Pro's classic lineup. And it goes without saying why I don't want Virtus Pro's classic lineup to remake that particular team, because they're not going to have any good results, whereas this MIBR team does have potential. The problem is a lot of it's still potential at the moment. We're seeing glimpses of it, we're seeing flashes of it, we're even seeing Cold Zero in prime form, we're seeing great maps from Fur, we're seeing not in this semi-finals, but occasional great performances from Fallen again. Things are starting to look positive. Taco's doing his old team play thing. Admittedly, Fops hasn't really been integrated. The map pool's starting to get there. If they could add in cash, that would make a very interesting veto against Astralis. They've got some details there. The problem is they're not quite there as a team yet. They're not as good as a team like Astralis. They were outclassed in all the areas where traditionally they used to succeed. Tight game, having to do a big comeback. Astralis has all of those intangibles over them, and then analytically in the game, Astralis is a much better team. So right now, not quite there yet for MMR. But it's the first event with the new lineup again. You got to give them some time to work into it. Let's see where they are 2 or 3 events down the line. Now, interestingly though, in both series, I thought you had some very interesting picks that are worth pointing out in the veto that will play a factor in the final. So one of them to note was that in the Na'Vi ENCE series, as I said, and I told you this would happen in my video, both teams ban cash. Both teams permaban cash. So who is going to be the team who floats cash? I told you it should have been both teams. No one was going to pick it first round. They should have both floated it till the second round, both gotten a big strong ban of the opponent out in the first round, and then one of them being forced, probably the second one, to be Na'Vi, to ban its second rotation. Instead, as I told you, ENCE didn't have to worry about banning cash because they knew that in these scenarios, Zeus always does the ban for you. He used to do the same thing when it was Nuke with Na'Vi. He does it with cash now. He always bans out cash in this scenario, even if he knows you don't play and it's your ban. So he did it again here, and he gave up a free veto. Then he tried to do a punish Dust 2 pick, which, even though it worked like a motherfucker, they stomped the shit out of ENCE, was very dangerous, especially because ENCE managed to win their pick, train the map that they're like 13 or 14 in a row, and I think 13 in a row on, and that, yes, Na'Vi's a very good team on that map, but for my money, because they don't pick it very often in series, they don't get enough playtime on the map. I think that could be the sleeper OP map for them. If they make Train and Overpass their heavy focus, first of all, they'll have a way better chance against a team like Astralis, and then secondly, they'll also put themselves in position, in my opinion, to be even more the other squads. That's where you can also punish a team like a Team Liquid, like an MIBR if you play them. But the guys from Na'Vi don't. The guys from ENCE were able to use Comfort, were able to just edge out that map. Now, the Dust 2 pick, the reason it's significant is because Astralis have shown they're not scared of Dust 2. They'll even pick it as a punish themselves. People think because of Alu's history, and actually because of this team when it first came along, if you remember ESL Cologne, where they were able to beat, I think it was Mouse Sports on Dust 2, like they looked solid on that map. So people still think of Dust 2 as a map for ENCE. But actually, after that loss to Na'Vi, in the last 3 months, they have a losing record on the map. It's one of only 2 maps they have a losing record on. Cash, because they haven't played it, so I count that as a losing record. And then Dust 2, they've won 4 out of 9 games on it now, and they've lost 3 out of their last 4. And those losses are to Hellraisers, Big. They won in overtime against G2, who's not that great a team, and they lost to Na'Vi. So quite frankly, Dust 2 is a liability for ENCE, and that's going to be interesting because in this final, not only have Astralis picked Dust 2 as a punish against opponent, but people have tried picking Dust 2 into Astralis, and it just doesn't typically work. So let's see how that plays out. On the other side of the bracket, we had Astralis versus MIBR, and this had its own weird aspect to the veto, because Coldzera, I think now, quite frankly, was playing mind games. He said after the semi-final against Renegades that MIBR themselves had planned to pick Dust 2 against Renegades, and so when Renegades picked it as a weird punish, he was really happy, and so instead they picked Train, and he was implying, like, ooh, we might pick Dust 2. Well, in this series, not only did MIBR not pick Dust 2, which wasn't banned, they themselves banned its second rotation to get Train as the decider. So if they weren't willing to play it as the decider, and they haven't played much Train yet in this new lineup, I don't know that I buy that they really were willing to do that. Meanwhile, the Astralis guys left the Dust 2 all the way till the last map. They said to MIBR, you pick Dust 2 or Train for the decider. So Astralis clearly is comfortable playing that map. So there's one factor already to look for, the Dust 2 factor. But now let's go and let's talk about what could happen here when we get into the veto, because there's 2 possible vetoes I want to run down. The first one is the same scenario that ENCE was just in, which is we both ban cash, because Astralis typically ban cash and ENCE permabans cash. So what happens in this scenario? Well, the difference here is what happened at the end of last year at Blast Pro Series Lisbon in the final, where the Na'Vi guys banned Nuke, and therefore cash ended up being played, and the guys from Astralis won it. Now, yes, Na'Vi permabans Cash. They are not comfortable. They are not prepared on that map. They did it as a Hail Mary. But ENCE also doesn't like that map. Hasn't played that map in the last 3 months on LAN. And Astralis, quite frankly, if you remember this core when they had Kirby, they were a very competent team on Cash, actually. Often they were forced into playing it, but they were very competent when they would play it. Obviously, most famously being that win against SK at the PGL Krakow Major in the quarterfinals. So I actually look at this particular series, and Astralis absolutely should not be banning Cash here. I already think they made a mistake themselves in banning Cash against MIBR. I do not believe MIBR would have picked Cash. I think Astralis actually could have gone ahead and banned an overpass there and made MIBR pick Train as the first map in that scenario. It didn't end up mattering. Obviously, Astralis was able to claw out that close game with some fortunate moments, some nice 1vx scenarios. Then again, that is what Astralis do, to be fair, when they're in tight games. That's why they're one of the greatest teams of all time, but they could have actually gotten an extra edge there. So going into this series, this is surely where Astralis says, we are not scared of you picking Cash at all. If you're willing to pick Cash as your map in the grand final of a major, and none of you have ever won a major before, only one of you has ever been in a major final or the major playoffs, then you know what? Go ahead. If you can beat us, we tip our hat to you. I don't believe that they will. So I believe ENCE will have to ban Cash and Astralis will ban Train. They don't need to ban Cash, which then I believe means ENCE now, when they come to their pick, now that Train should be out of there, because I think that should be the Astralis ban for them, because that's the map that they tend to ban the most. After they ban Cash, if they have to ban other maps, they ban Train typically. Train is now a map that ENCE has won 13 maps in a row on and is now 11-0 on in the last 3 months. Has even won a bunch here. So I think it's the logical ban to get out the equation if you're Astralis. I think that means that ENCE should pick Mirage. It's their most picked map generally. Astralis lost it to Renegades, although actually, funnily enough, so did ENCE lose it to Renegades in this same tournament, but in the first phase, what used to be the major qualifiers, now the new challenger stage. I think actually, even though ENCE is a very, very good Mirage team, like they impress me more and more as I see them play the better teams, I actually do think Astralis can edge this, and partly because they are so good at adapting what they do on the T side of that map, and yes, they win so many 1vx situations and they don't get shook in them. So even though I've seen ENCE do some amazing shit on this map, I've also seen it happen as a result of overperformance from some of their players. Now, Astralis, I think actually, logically, will just pick Nuke. It's the logical one to pick. ENCE doesn't particularly like it. ENCE hasn't played it very much. I think they're like 4-4 on it in the last 3 months. Astralis is obviously godlike on it. They're 29-0 on it with this lineup. They haven't played that much themselves the last few months, but it's a strong pick for them. It's a great comfort pick. I think they pick it and I think they win this. So actually, I think if those are the map picks, it will be a 2-0. The other option for Astralis, though, would be to do a punish pick Dust 2, to say we've tried it already in the series, in the tournament. We've seen that actually ENCE isn't very well prepared on the map, don't look in good shape on the map. But here's the thing. If Astralis are going to think themselves back to that series that they had against NIP, where they showed a little bit of weakness towards the end of that Dust 2 game, I don't know that the comfort's there to do it in a major final. Even people like Astralis get nervous in major finals. I'm just going to tell you that. That's what makes people who do godlike plays all the time in major finals, like Flusher, Olaf Meister, these sorts of guys, that's what makes them gods, is that somehow, even when they're nervous, they can pull off the amazing plays. That then, I think, leaves ENCE to ban Dust 2, Astralis ban Overpass, and we get Inferno as the decider, which Astralis will win. They are godlike on Inferno. Meanwhile, ENCE is just okay on it, and that's even against low-level competition. Now, the problem, as you might have noticed here, that's going to be the first veto phase. I'll do another one in a second, but think about if that one happens. This is quite a likely one in terms of who bans what, who picks what. Right? That means that Astralis is getting to ban the best map of ENCE. ENCE has to pick their own best map, which is still a solid map for Astralis, even though, sure, they lose on it. They just don't lose very often. They have a winning record on it. And Astralis gets to pick the map they are undefeated on, probably the best of all time on. They'll win that. And then the decider would be the other map that Astralis is probably the best of all time on, a map that there's something mental like 11-0 on in the last few months, Inferno, that they're godlike on and no one can beat them on. So this isn't a good veto for the guys from ENCE. They don't have a lot of edges there. It's hard to see how they're going to win two maps out of 3. But there is another world, and this all relies on how bold ENCE is going to be. If they actually can literally on the one hand, reflect and admit we are the underdog. Astralis overall is a better team, but to quote the old Miracle on Ice, it doesn't matter if they're a better team every other day. We just need to win this one match. Then that actually could put them in the frame of mind where they could do what I'm about to suggest, and this is what they should do, which is you float Cash first rotation. Do you think Astralis will actually pick Cash as their map in the first round? Remember, as long as you ban Nuke, Astralis can still pick Inferno map. They're incredibly strong on not that great a map for ENCE and still have a very strong pick. So they're very much incentivized not to punish pick Cash. And in fact, I'd argue if Astralis punish picks Cash, actually they're giving up a lot of the advantages that they have in this series. As I mentioned with the Renegades veto, they're giving up comfort on a map they practice and win on a lot. They're giving up scouting information on the opponent, not as many games to watch of ENCE on Cash. They haven't played it in the last 3 months. They're giving up the chance to have the opponent be intimidated on your map pick. I don't think they will be as intimidated. It'll feel like a DM, right? And it's fucking Cash. Cash is a fucking DM map to some degree. It takes away a lot of the strengths of Astralis. I don't think they'd do it. I think they would revert to the Inferno ban, and therefore ENCE could get Nuke out of there. And even though I still think they'd lose Inferno, I think they have a better chance overall on Inferno. I still think actually they have a small chance in Nuke. They actually can be a solid team generally. You look at them, the eye test says they know how to play them up. They just don't have the record on it, and I don't see the comfort of them picking into it, quite frankly, so I can't believe it entirely. But that would make for a better series, especially because then you end up in a world where the decider could be Mirage. The decider could be Dust 2. The decider could be Overpass. That's a much more favourable series if you're the ENCE guys. But you know what? It takes a lot of balls. And yes, exclude all jokes about Alu here. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't do that move there. I think it's a really, really tough call to do a massive punish pick and permaban float in the final of a major. In the final of a major, I probably, as a coach or in-game leader, want to go with comfort, give my guys their best chance, hope we win our map, let's see what happens on their map, and then let's see. You know what, maybe they choke, maybe they have a bad day, maybe they fuck up their Nuke game, maybe we can even win 2-0. It could happen. Probably won't, it shouldn't happen, but it could. Now, one thing to point out here is the form level of the players throughout the tournament. So what's interesting is for ENCE, coming into the playoffs, Sergey, the young star they have, was really underperforming. Alu was very solid, but not quite as godlike as you would expect from him from times. Ariel was pretty underwhelming, a guy who stepped up massively towards the end of last year. Alexi B had been way stronger than you expect for an in-game leader. He's normally not a bigger fragger. And X7, their support player, was standard, but that meant low numbers. Now in the quarterfinals, Alu went godlike, Sergey improved, X7 overperformed. In the semi-finals, it was Ariel's turn. He went big time. X7 strong again. This time Alu was poor. This time Sergey was more of a non-factor. Then you've got, so overall in terms of fragging, you've seen different people have series that were good, but overall, you look at the fragging strength, it is worse than Astralis, and the big problem they have is they don't have the tactical edge. They've had the tactical edge, I'd actually say, overall, against, I would say Team Liquid, because I don't think they're quite as tactically as they were last year, and I would edge them over Na'Vi, because I think Na'Vi have done some weird things in the veto, and Zeus's head doesn't look like he's in the game to some degree for me. So I actually have to say that they don't have any edges here. You look on the Astralis side of things, coming into the playoffs, everyone was playing fucking insane. Device was bonkers, Dupree was very strong, Magus was very strong, Glaive was way too strong for an in-game leader who's tactical, Zipnix was absurdly strong for a support player. Then you look at the quarters, Magus and Zipnix were the godlike ones. You look at the semis, Magus and Dupree were the sick ones. Device has been somewhat chilling, except for that Dust 2 game against NIP. You'd figure either he chokes it up and they win anyway, or he's going to have a big performance eventually. That's how he's been able to win all these MVPs for the Astralis guys. Let's see if that happens. Let's see how Glaive does. No one really truly's played bad. Like in that semi against MIBR, the stats weren't great, but they won the series and one of them handedly on their own map. So in terms of fragging, you still have to give the edge over to the guys from Astralis. So you look at all the factors going against ENCE. It's almost everything, I've got to be honest. Map pools against them, the fragging level doesn't look like it can probably hold up. Like, is X7 really going to have an entire playoff run where he's just like positive numbers, big fragging, nice ADR? If he can, I'll give him incredibly big props and say what a revelation this guy was. Because everyone, we now know all the other members in the team, but the idea this guy's going to have a legendary playoff run, that would be truly special. In experience, obviously that's all on the ENCE guys. They've only got Alu, and even he's far less experienced than most of the Astralis guys. How about that Astralis hasn't lost a map in a playoff series since they played at PGL Krakow 2017. They are literally, no exaggeration, 10-0 in maps over these last two major playoffs. Their opponent never wins the opponent's map pick. That's how dominant this team is. How about that Astralis has never lost a major final they've played in? This will be their third one, and they will be going for a perfect 3-for-3. The old Joe Montana record, as it were, from the NFL. A lot of factors going against ENCE here. Part of me, if they can win, thinks for what it'll take against Astralis, it would have to be so legendary. I'd have to appreciate it. I would find it incredible. I root for ENCE in some senses. But the part of me that reveres greatness, that celebrates the best to ever play, those who innovate, those who perfect, those who bring us to a higher level of competition, and in terms of this team, on the threshold of doing things no one has ever done in Counter-Strike, I think you have to look to Astralis and say if they're going to win, well deserved. What an incredible team. This video and all of the content on my channel is kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Andreas, Snazore Westerlund, Gardner Wilson, James Harding, OllieJ, Tobias Bernasconi, NateDOhDoubleG, Travis Greb, Tristan Jones, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to take part in an esports discussion with yours truly? Would you like teasers for some of my upcoming content? See who the guests are going to be. Do you want to ask me a question for my monthly video AMA? Perhaps you'd like to suggest a guest you'd like to see in my content or a topic to discuss. Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.